Okay, this meeting is recording.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Toney. I serve as chair of the State Bar Audit Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome everybody to the first Audit Committee meeting for the State Bar, the first meeting of 2025. I'd like to welcome all of the trustees, Trustee Barahona, Trustee Buenaventura, Trustee Huser, and Trustee Stevens to the meeting. We have 100% attendance today. That always makes me happy. I want to welcome all of the State Bar staff with a special welcome to the new State Bar Staff Coordinator for the Audit Committee, Nate Dozier. So welcome everybody, and welcome everybody who may be watching or listening remotely or in any of the designated locations that are open to the public today. So our first order of business is roll call. If I can ask for a roll call, I'd appreciate that.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Barahona,
Present.
Buenaventura,
Present.
Huser,
Present.
Stevens,
Present.
and Tony.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So we always start our meetings with a call for public comment. And you will have 3 minutes for public comment. You can comment either by Zoom video or by phone. I'm going to go ahead and ask if we have any people who have already signed up previously to start with.
Chair Tony, there are no pre-signups for public comment.
Okay. I'm going to give an opportunity for anybody to either raise your hand on Zoom, or if you're participating by phone, pressing *9 on your keypad. Has anybody indicated they wish to give public comment?
Yes, Chair Tony, we have one hand raised for public comment, and the first speaker will be Todd Hill.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Todd. You may begin.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the Audit Committee. This committee has a choice. Defend the integrity of the State Bar or allow it to erode beyond repair. For years, I've raised concerns about procedural misconduct, transparency failures, and fundamental breaches of duty.
I'm sorry, Todd, we seem to have lost your video. I'm sorry, your audio. We seem to have lost your audio. If you want to check your audio, the mute button.
I've submitted clear, documented evidence showing that the State Bar has delayed or ignored corrective action on serious regulatory failures that have left students, including myself, in legal and financial limbo. Yet here we are, still waiting for accountability. If the courts demand accountability from every attorney, why is the State Bar refusing to demand the same of itself? Despite overwhelming evidence, procedural accountability is still being treated as an inconvenience rather than a duty. This committee has an opportunity today to change that, to act rather than delay, to correct rather than cover, to lead rather than follow inertia. What message does it send to the public, to the courts, to every attorney in California, if the very institution responsible for upholding legal ethics refuses to enforce its own standards? The path forward is clear. Admit the procedural failures, Engage in direct, good faith resolution. Settle outstanding matters now before they become a permanent stain on this institution. Every delay, every excuse, every bureaucratic roadblock only makes this worse. Every day this drags on, the cost rises, not just financially, but reputationally. The State Bar has a chance to demonstrate that it is still capable of self-correction. This is a defining moment. Do you want to be remembered as the stewards who restored confidence in this institution, or as the ones who let it erode beyond repair? The time for waiting is over. The time for action is now. Settle this, resolve it, restore integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Do we have any other public comment? People wishing to make public comment today?
Mr. Chair, at this time, there are no more hands raised from the public for comment.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I want to also thank, we had 2 public comments that came in writing. One was from Todd Hill. The other was from Renisha Hubbard. I want you to know that we do review comments that are also submitted in writing. So thank you very much. So I think the first thing on the agenda is a quick chair's report, and I have a very quick verbal report to give. On October 25th, I had a meeting with Annie Louie, who is our contact at the MGO Audit Committee on expectations for this year's audit. November 8th, I met with the State Bar Public Trust Liaison, Enrique Zuniga, to get an update on the disciplinary diversion program that he is coordinating. And on February 3rd, I joined a meeting of the Executive Committee to review a state audit. We will be addressing that in the closed session of today's meeting. So I would like to start by asking for a review of the September 9, 2024 open session minutes. That was in our packet. And I guess the first is I'd like to open this up to any trustee or staff person who has any corrections or modifications they would like to make to the open session minutes of September 9, 2024. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve these minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
Buenaventura makes the motion.
Second.
Trustee Stevens seconds. Is there any discussion? I'd like to ask the committee coordinator to take a roll call.
Of course, Chair. Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
User,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
and Tony.
Aye.
The vote count is 5 in the affirmative, 0 noes, 0 abstentions, and 0 recusals. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. So we have an unusual item, which is a amendment to correct a past open session minutes, January 19, 2023. So that's about 2 years ago. So this is one where I'd like the coordinator to put on screen, if you would, the amendment that we're being asked to consider. Okay. Thank you for putting up the resolution. What I'd like is if you can scroll to the portion of the minutes themselves that has, I think, a red line of the modification we're being asked to approve. I just want to make sure we all look at it, and if anyone has any questions, just want to make sure we do this right.
Your Chair, Tony, give me one moment.
Take your time. Trustee Huser? Yes.
Can I just ask our legal counsel a question? Can members who were not members of the audit committee at that time vote on this resolution or not? And if not, do we have a quorum to vote on this?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Huser. If the trustees had the ability to review the recording from that meeting and agree with the resolution language as amended, it would be appropriate to vote on the item. If you hadn't had the opportunity to review it, then you could abstain and but we wouldn't have quorum to approve it. So my recommendation would then be to perhaps put this on the agenda for the next meeting and provide a link to the trustees to review to be able to then amend.
Thank you for the question. I had the same question. I was too embarrassed to ask it. Thank you. I was the only
Never
person.
embarrassed to ask any dumb questions.
I was the only person who was on the committee at the time. I did note that.
Yeah, I, for one, have not had the opportunity to review the recording, and so therefore I personally would have to recuse myself.
Look, here's what I'm going to suggest here. Based upon Trustee Huser's recommendation, I don't believe there's an absolute urgency to adopting this at this meeting. I don't think it prevents or holds up anything. And so if I could, unless there's any objection, request that we postpone this item to the next meeting. And in the meantime, if the committee coordinator could send a link to the recording as our general counsel recommended, so that way everybody could, with confidence, feel that, yes, we verified that this was inadvertently left out of the minutes and it needs to be accurately reflected in the amendment. Is that okay with everybody? Is there any objection to me doing that? Okay, thank you very much. I do appreciate the question, Trustee Huser, and the response, General Counsel Duffin. So let us go ahead. And I believe the next item is the consent agenda. And what we have on the consent agenda is two items. One is approval of the 2024 Q3 Board and Management Travel Expense Report. And the other is approval of the 2024 Q4 Board and Management Travel Expense Report. Are there any questions, or does any member, any trustee wish to pull one of these from the consent? Hearing no objections, I would like to invite trustees to make a motion in a second on this.
So moved.
Trustee Huser makes the motion. Thank you.
Second.
Trustee Barahona seconds. Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Huser,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
and Tony.
Aye.
The vote count is 5 in the affirmative, 0 noes, 0 abstains, zero recusals. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Do appreciate that. Um, next item on our agenda, we're moving to the business agenda part of the meeting. And we're going to spend a little bit of time on the 2025 Audit Committee work plan. And I'd like to ask that be put up on the screen, and I'd actually like to go through it together. I know I have a couple of questions and things I want to point out, and I want to invite other trustees to do the same. Okay, thank you very much. All right. So the first item that I see here is the single audit. And that's what we sometimes just shorthand call it the State Bar Annual Audit. I believe that's, no, this is the audit. This is the separate audit that's required when the State Bar expends more than $750 in federal awards. And my question on this is, and if nobody knows right now, is there an expectation, given regime change, that the State Bar is going to get more than $750,000 in federal awards? Wondering if anybody had any insight into that.
We haven't heard anything yet, but you know, it's a great question.
Okay. If these are questions that we don't need answers right now because I didn't ask them before, but what I'm curious about is if the answer is yes, we've got this in place. If the answer is no, that we don't get more than $750,000 in federal awards for the calendar or for our fiscal year, excuse me, then the question is A, do we have to do an audit, and B, do we have to pay for it?
So the provision is not if we receive it, but if we spend it. So something I don't know, but we can easily get from staff and follow up, is if we already are in receipt of federal grant awards that will be dispersed in an amount totaling at least $750,000 between the period October 1 to September 30th, the federal fiscal year. So we may have already received funds. You know, there is a cycle by which funds are distributed. So this is about expenditure, not receipt. So that's the first thing I want to clarify.
Thank you.
My understanding is that the cost of these grants the cost of the audit is charged to the grant.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on a single audit? Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the information technology and cybersecurity audit. And this is one I have particular interest in. What I want to know from other trustees is I'll tell you my interest and my level of engagement interest. And I want to see if there are any other trustees who share that, or if trustees are like fine with me taking the lead. I'm very interested in being involved in the scope of in drafting what the scope of the services are going to be. I want to make sure that we include things like the protecting against, assessing and protecting against the increased capacity of artificial intelligence to be used for security breaches. I want to be able to review past the 2023 cybersecurity audit to see if there are things that are missing that maybe I or maybe other trustees might be interested in saying, you know what, we should, make sure these things are included in the scope. Because if you don't, things that you don't include in the scope, then the vendor's not required to deliver, right? That's just how it is. And I am a believer in a process that where the audit committee has some input on the scope, the RFP, selection of the vendor, and then, obviously we will review the final results. Trustee Huser, I see your hand.
My only question, I had this generally for the entire plan, so I'll just raise it here since
Please.
this is the first time it's come up, is what is our budget for this overall audit plan? And if we add things, either these good ideas that trustee Tony just had or other things, or remove them, are we at risk of staying on budget? And how do we ensure that we stay on budget for the audit plan?
Very good question. Thank you for asking that.
So the items currently reflected in the work plan, to the extent there is a fiscal impact, they are reflected in the draft budget that the finance committee will be reviewing on the 11th, and then the budget the board will ask to be adopted at the end of February. If you add things today, we would have to go and make an adjustment. So there's still time to do that. I think that's the simplest answer.
Yeah, I think, my only reservation, having looked at this whole thing and, then having this discussion on these specific cybersecurity issues is I'm concerned that we not go too wide on our budget since we have other budget issues and things. And so I wondered, for all of this, what do we have to do under our charter? What do we want to do? And if that's different, what's the difference in budget?
It's a fair question. Thank you. I will tell you what my thinking is on this. My thinking is that part of the competitive bidding process is, one of the values to that is, making sure we get the best price possible, so that it is not simply a vendor that we have used before that will add on, have the starting point being what they charged last time, and then adding a percentage, and then, yes, you're right, trustee Huser, if we add things that weren't in the previous scope, we'll also expect an incremental increase. I think that in situations like this, let's say that we added several things on a scope and that all the vendors came in higher than the budget, then I think that's when the negotiation happens and you say, well, if this is our budget, what do you recommend being cut from it so that we can meet our budget? Your point, which I think is very well taken, is that we need to stay within the budget. And that's something I'm committed to. Any other questions or comments or particular interest of any other trustee in being involved in some of the details of reviewing scope, RFPs, you know, the vendors that come in. Okay. Well, you can always contact me in between meetings if you get struck by a moment of inspiration. Let us, I would then say, let's go ahead and move to the next item. I'm talking about on the sheet. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Okay, the California State Auditor audit. This is routine. This happens every 2 years. In closed session, we will be reviewing and discussing a draft of the current audit. Any questions on this? Okay, then let's move to the next one. I think it's the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Grants Audit. And that is something that we do every year. It's routine. And in fact, there's an agenda item right after this one that will be discussing the most recent Trust Fund Commission audit. Are there any questions on this audit? Okay. If we could go to the next one. Now, this is the annual financial statement audit. This is one that we do every year. And we are currently in the first year of a 3-year contract with MGO that can be extended another 2 years. So depending on how you look at it, it's 3 to 5 years. And this was one where I was involved in the scope of work, determining the scope of work, the RFP, and selection of vendors. So any questions on the State Bar annual audit? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the next item. Okay, this is the ethics and accountability reporting, the whistleblower anti-retaliation program reporting. This is something that the full board the audit committee reviews at least once a year. And it looks like we'll be doing that in Q2 of this year. And this is to protect the employees of the State Bar who want to report concerns about lack of compliance, wrongdoing, that they're protected from doing so. Okay. Any questions? Okay, let's move to the next one. The Office of Public Trust Liaison Reporting. I have been meeting quarterly with Enrique Zuniga, who is the State Bar Public Trust Liaison. And in Q2, he will present an annual report to the Audit Committee so that everybody will be informed. I just meet with them periodically, quarterly, because, just keep things on track. Any questions on this piece? Okay, let's go to the next one, please. Okay, oversight and governance, evaluate and monitor internal controls, review quarterly travel and expense reports. This is routine. We did it today in consent. Are there any questions on this? All right, let's move to the review office of compliance activities. And this is something where once a year, we review a report and get a presentation from the Office of Compliance. And we have that as Q3 for this year. Questions, comments? All right, let's move to the next one. The Audit Committee Annual Work Plan, that is what we're doing now for the 2025. And this says for 2026, we will do that when the time is ready. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, let's keep going.
We've reached the end, Mr. Chair.
Okay. There's a couple of things. When I downloaded, and you may have already changed this, there was reference to the audit committee having 6 members. And as we now have 5 members, if you can do this later. If you find out where it is in this document, it was on page 5 of 12, but in this format, this is an 8-page document, so I don't know where it falls. But if you can look at that after the meeting, it's very, very small typographical. And the one thing that I would like to add to this that's not on here is I think the audit committee should engage in a conversation about review of unlicensed lawyer referral services. This has been a concern of mine for a while. I think that the audit committee is a good place to help the state bar to plan that. Open to recommendations or feedback on that from other trustees. But I think that there are a number of online lawyer referral services that are undermining the process that the state bar has of licensing and approving lawyer referral services, and as a way to protect the public from unscrupulous actors. Any comments or questions on that? We can discuss it at future meetings. I don't want a long discussion on it now, but that's something I would like us to pursue.
You'd like to pursue it as part of this audit plan, or just like to pursue it generally?
I would like the audit committee to ask staff to come up with a plan to at least have an inventory of who's out there, what we think they're doing. And the thing I have talked about is maybe doing one of those, partnering with a law school to do one of those testing programs, where, students can do some testing of some of these services and see if they're getting referrals from services that are not licensed to do so. That kind of thing, because I think we should be more proactive. All right. Thank you for the question, Trustee Huser. Very good question.
I support that, Mr. Chair. I think that's actually a good idea. it's going along with our public protection charge, and being proactive in doing something like that, I think is a way to look out for our people and making sure that they're getting the right services with the right organizations, and it's legitimate. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Trustee Buenaventura. Any other comments? This is by itself is not um, doesn't need a vote by itself. So what does need a vote, however, is the plan itself, the work plan. And so with the understanding that we will later add a component that has to do with review of unlicensed lawyer referral services, I would like the motion to be placed on the screen. Thank you very much, Nate. And entertain a motion and a second. Yes, we have a hand. That's a motion, Trustee
No, I
Barahona?
just had a quick question before I move to the motion, Chair, if that's okay.
Please do.
In reviewing some of the public comment, I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding this correctly, which is that if a person has any legal oversight challenges, that there is a method to file that complaint, and that is not through this process. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because there's sort of a sense of lack of public engagement, but there is public engagement. It just is through a different avenue if somebody has a complaint, per se, about their situation. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask for some staff help on this, please, responding to very good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Aline.
Okay, so there are a number of avenues, and I think maybe the one you're thinking of, Trustee Barahona, is the whistleblower program that is also part of the work plan.
Yeah.
We do have members, not only members of our staff, but members of the public, licensees, anyone that has a grievance
Yes.
with respect to activities of the state bar is able, through our website, submit a complaint under the whistleblower program that would review inappropriate sort of governmental activities and retaliatory actions or complaints. And that goes directly to the California Department of Justice for their review. And we do have a contract with them that was approved in 2023. And so that goes there. Obviously, we also have the ability to, for those having grievances against licensees, to file that complaint for disciplinary review that goes to OCTC, or when appropriate, gets referred to our 2201 program. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think that I just wanted to clarify that on this call, because it addresses some of the public comment that was shared. So I just wanted to clarify that for folks listening in as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to add that with respect to like CPRA requests, which might be something that you are thinking of as well in terms of the public comments, once those issues are brought up to our attention, we do review them and we do respond to them in a matter that is appropriate to respond to.
Thank you so
Thank you much for the question, and thank you very much for the response and clarification. Much appreciated. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts before we move to the motion on hand on the table? Okay. Well, I would invite and accept a motion and a second for approval of the 2025 Audit Committee Work Plan.
I'll move to approve.
Trustee Hooser moves.
Second.
Trustee Buenaventura seconds. May we call for a vote, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
Huser,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
That is 5 votes in the affirmative. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask for clarification, Chair, with respect to the addition of the LRS item? Are you asking, and sorry if I missed this, staff to bring back a revised version of the work plan for the next audit committee meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And staff has made note of that. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. I believe the next item on the agenda is the approval of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission grants audit. I believe we have a presentation prepared.
Good morning, everyone. Today I am presenting on the new requirement, or fairly new requirement, that was added to Business and Professions Code 6210.5G, which requires the State Bar to ensure that the awards made by the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission are consistent with statute, rules, and any other governing authorities. And so the requirement was that the State Bar develop a program to audit a representative sample of these grant awards each year. So this change went into effect January 1st of 2023. So we began with the 2022 grant year to be in compliance. For that grant year, we did an RFP and ultimately contracted with Ernst & Young to perform this first review. And as enclosed as an attachment A, is the our summary of their white paper of the process and sort of the conclusions. Although the conclusions are ours, they are not Ernst & Young's. And that was part of the contract, that they wouldn't release an actual report, but we would drop our conclusions. And so Ernst & Young conducted a 3-part process where they developed a risk assessment plan. They did a monitoring of the actual recipients, and then they did a section that monitored the actual grant awards itself. And so they went through that process for all of the grants that were issued in 2022, or awarded in 2022, because we did have continuing grants from the prior years that wouldn't have fallen into that. But and so ultimately, once they went through with that process, the results, in our opinion, conclusion is that the awards were made consistent with the statute, rules, and other governing authorities. For the 2023 and 2024 years, we issued another RFP for those years, and we ultimately went with MGO to conduct this audit, and they did both years together. And as you'll see in attachment B, MGO did issue a report that went through the process and the procedures, and ultimately the outcome where they essentially decided there was no findings of anything that would indicate that they were made outside of the statute, rules, and governing authorities. They did take a slightly different approach to their process. And so they broke it down between our formula grants and our competitive grants. And sort of then within each of those things, they did individual analysis of each of those steps that the commission is required to review in order to determine eligibility. And then they also evaluated how we calculated the formula grant amounts, as well as reviewed this sort of the grant amounts that were issued through the competitive grant process. And so so for both of those, or all 3 years, the conclusion we've determined is that they were made in consent or consistent with the statute, rules, and governing authorities. And so as part of the requirement of the statute, we need to then send these reports with our Legal Service Trust Fund financial statement that we do each year that was mentioned earlier. And so we are here to sort of seek your approval to approve the audits as submitted, and then so that we can then issue them to the legislature as required. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much for the overview. That was both precise and succinct, and I like the combination. So I'm going to open it up to the trustees for any questions or comments. Well, I tell you what, while you're thinking about it, just so happens I've got one.
Yep.
And that is that, it's very interesting. I have to tell you that attachment B, which is the MGO version, is much more satisfying than the information presented. It's much more satisfying than the Ernst and Young. And it's more satisfying because it's more precise with the numbers, with there's more detail about, the pro bono allocations, like you said, breaking down the competitive grants and versus the regular grants, and then listing each of the big programs and the number of grantees, number of samples each time. It's a level of precision that gives me much more confidence than the one. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what Ernst and Young did. I'm not saying they reviewed it any less rigorously. I'm saying that in the presentation of the report, the MGO report, I think that other people will find it more satisfying. And I'm saying that because part of what I'm saying is I would really encourage sticking with MGO going forward because of the detail that they decided to provide.
Right, and I can just speak to that a little bit. Part of why we chose to go and do another RFP process for the subsequent years is we were not satisfied with what Ernst & Young is willing to put forth as the outcome and the deliverables. And so we felt like we needed, and they have their reasons for that, which I can't, fault. But so that's why we wanted to go with an organization that was willing to put on their letterhead, sort of some conclusionary information, because I thought that was more in line with what the actual requirement is. And then in terms of the MGO selection, this selection process for the RFP was done separately from the regular state bar audit and single audit process. I would recommend that it kind of be folded into that process for future years, because it makes a lot of sense to use the same firm that's doing our single audits. If there is another single audit, we'll do this last one, but in the future, and plus our legal service trust fund financial statement, because this is a really natural extension of that work. And so MGO had a much easier time doing this work because they were so familiar with all of our grant streams and how each of them, because they look at them for the financial statement purposes. And so it was a much smoother, cleaner product. And so our recommendation would be to, continue to try to use the same firm that the state bar is using. And so we only contracted with them for 22 or 23 and 24. So as we get through the year, we'll need to recontract with somebody for the 25 audit, but our intention would be to try to stick with MGO as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. So it's not just in my imagination that
No.
very different and look different and feel that it's much more satisfying the more
Yes.
recent one. And any other questions or comments that any other trustees may have?
I just had one comment, trustee Tony, if I may. And I apologize for my dog barking, so I'll be quick, which is that, given the importance of this fund and seeing these audit results, I feel quite pleased and appreciative of the staff that are administrating these funds, as well as the auditor that was able to provide such thorough set of information. I think this is really helpful and important to see. I have some curiosity about the auditor presenting the results during the next audit presentation. Is that something that MGO perhaps would be interested in, or would that increase our cost in terms of the contract we have with them?
I can't speak to whether it would increase the cost, but Annie Louie was also our sort of touch point. So she will be presenting on the other audits and whatnot. So I can't imagine that it would be much of a burden to add this to that conversation, and I can connect with her on that.
Thank you very much. That's a great idea, Trustee Betahona. Thank you very much for bringing that up, and thank you very much, Heidi, for being willing to follow up.
My pleasure.
Any other questions or comments? Well, this is really great. These type of conversations make me feel like we're doing our due diligence as a committee. So thank you very much. If there are no other questions, may I ask for the resolution to be posted? Okay, this is a resolution regarding the approval of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission grants audit for the years 2022 and for a combined 2023 and 2024. Happy to entertain a motion and a second.
Move to approve.
Trustee Betahona makes the motion.
I'll second.
Trustee Hooser, second. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for a roll call.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Barahona,
Aye.
Buenaventura,
Aye.
User,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
That's 5 votes in the affirmative. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. So what I have on my little notes for the meeting is that this concludes the regular business portion of the meeting. I just want to confirm that that is the case and I haven't left anything out.
You are correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So this concludes the regular business portion of the meeting. We're gonna go to closed session, then we're gonna come back after closed session to conclude the meeting. So Audit Committee will now move to closed session pursuant to Government Code 11126.2 to discuss the audit by the California State Auditor's Office. Once we're through with closed session, I will return to adjourn the meeting and if appropriate, provide any updates or reports from the closed session. I believe that we should, those of us who will be in closed session should have received an email by now with a link to that closed session. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we will recess this public portion of the meeting, go into closed session, and then we'll come back. See everybody. think we're just waiting for trustee Stevens. I'm sure he'll be here in just a minute. Well, I'd like to announce that we are reconvening. We are reconvening the State Bar Audit Committee in public session. We have concluded our closed session and there are no reportable actions that were taken. At this point, we have concluded our agenda, and unless I hear any objection from any trustee, I don't see any, I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.